Welcome to the fourth lecture of the creation of the Quran. In the previous lecture we discussed the humming runners. The humming runners, they are the super force of the Big Bang. This super force or humming runners were split into the first one, which surrounded the primordial water and prevented it from spreading to out of the limits set for it. It started the first inflation and it created the space-time curvature. The second one was the annihilation of the matter and antimatter, the force that caused the annihilation of the matter and antimatter. The third one was the raiders. The raiders had three processes. The first one, it raised smoke, known by the scientists as the dark matter. The second one, the primordial water or the symmetries soaked or absorbed the energy or force existed, which was the strong nuclear force. And the third process happened by the raiders was the intermediating of the weak force between a symmetry and another. In our lecture today we will discuss the following process of creation, which is the conveyed consecutively. The conveyed consecutively are a group of forces initiated to split or separate the strings from the symmetries of the primordial water. They are mentioned in verse number 1, chapter 77, Al-Bursalat, which says, by the conveyed consecutively. Imam Ali described this period by saying, filling every little gap in between them, pushing the front to the back and the back to the front, and throwing the still water on the rippling. It continued until the water became completely developed. Well, this conveyed consecutively is divided into at least 4 energies, combined with a wind initiated by them or initiated by certain source. So the first one was those that storm heavily. Verse number 2 says, those that storm heavily, as we see them here. In the diagram here we see this includes only the period of the consecutively the conveyed consecutively. The center one is the storming energy. The second one is the spreading wind, which is mentioned in verse number 3, which says, and the spreaders widely. The third one, which is the separating wind or energy. The fourth one, which is creating of the recite reminders. Now, the duty of these 4 energies initiated in this period was to separate symmetries, was to separate strings existed inside the symmetries, that they don't belong to each other, like they don't belong to the matter. They need to be separated to make the symmetries as pure matter to make the atom in the future. The first force was the storming energy. The storming energy is just this energy combined with the wind. The wind which was initiated previously during the annihilating of the matter and antimatter, which was sterilized and became calm. Now, by combining with this third, with this conveyed consecutively, the first one, the storming ones, it stormed again, became fierceful and stormed again. And when that happened, it started to raid or started to storm on the primordial water, initiating fluctuations, high waves of like the ocean water waves, tides. By that, the first or the easiest strings to split from the symmetries of the primordial water. The second one had a different process, which was like putting the wet clothes on under the sun and the wind, to when the wind blow, make the water make it dry and to the water to spread away from it. So it is similar to such a process, like when these high tides was attacked by that wind and energy. It goes in between them, splitting out or separating the unwanted strings from the symmetry. Actually, this was in difficulty, was more difficult than the first one. The first one was easy, the storming, just storming on the water. The first one split. This one, no, it needed a little more process, like little more time, more stronger process to make it separate from the matter. The third one split actually were the electrons. The electrons were deeper than the first two. The first two, the scientists know them as the W and Z bosons. But the third one were the electrons. The electrons were inside these symmetries, were deeper than the bosons, and had a different process to make them separate from the symmetries of the primordial water. When the three of them were split or separated from the primordial water symmetries, that wind and energy could divide them into two categories. The category which was in the hot region, that contained mostly the baryonic matter, and the electrons and the bosons were directed and stayed in the cold region. So this energy and the wind, where its duty was to separate between the two, between the clean matter, the pure matter, primordial water, and those which were split from them. Verse number 4 says, those that separate into categories. That means they were separated into categories after separating the electrons from the symmetries. We have it here in our diagram. This concerns the period of the conveyed consecutively. In the center is the storming wind, as we see it, the easiest, just make high tides. The second one, just where the spreading wind and the energy, this is the waves, the wind and energy go in between them, splitting or separating one of the bosons out of it. The third one, which was the separating wind that split the electrons, and made them into two categories: the hot region and the cold region and the hot region. Now the matter is like the matter is pure of any electro weak strings. What remained inside were the reciting reminders, and were the electromagnetic particle, which was the photon. Now the recite reminders were more deeper and more difficult than the three others separated previously. So they were separated in another process and were divided into two categories. They were the excusers or the wrners. Now the recite reminders, the verse shows us that they have behaviors, they can speak, they can recite the reminder. That means they were living things. Actually, they were the basic organic of the living things. And they were into two parts. The first part, which were the wrners, which were the angels, and the second one were the excusers, which were all the human beings and animals. So the organics, basic organics of the living creatures existed at this period. They were very simple. They were just ghosts of their combination, and they were in the easiest and earliest form they could have existed. The last thing here is shows the cold region and the hot region, and of course at this period the start of first signs of the light of the electromagnetic, because the electroweak bosons were separated, the recite reminders were separated. What remained inside the baryonic matter, or the symmetries of the were the photons now. So they are more or clear or obvious or could be seen at this period. This is the end of our fourth lecture. Thank you for your listening.